Your legs aren't getting weaker because you're getting older. They're getting weaker because they're missing the nutrients they need to rebuild. The good news? You can start changing that with the foods you eat tonight. Today, I'm walking you through 6 foods, ranked from genuinely helpful to the one I think matters most, that support real, rebuildable leg strength as you age. And I mean that last one specifically. It's not a protein, it's not a supplement, and it's something a lot of people your age were told for decades to avoid. Once you hear why that advice was wrong, I don't think you'll look at your grocery list the same way. Stick around for that one. Before we start, tell me in the comments, has getting up from a chair or going up a flight of stairs started to feel harder than it used to? I read these, and honestly, they shape exactly what I dig into on this channel. Here's the framework for tonight. Every food on this list does one of 3 things for your legs. It triggers your muscles to actually rebuild themselves. It calms the inflammation that quietly wears muscle down over time. Or it improves blood flow, so oxygen and nutrients actually reach the muscle that needs them. Building, calming, delivering. Keep those 3 words in mind. Every item tonight maps onto one or more of them. Coming in at number 6, eggs. You've probably heard the old advice: eggs raise your cholesterol, avoid the yolk, stick to egg whites. For most people, that guidance has genuinely shifted. Current research shows dietary cholesterol has a much smaller effect on blood cholesterol for most people than scientists once believed. And current dietary guidelines no longer set a strict daily cholesterol limit for the general population. I say most people deliberately. If you have a specific condition like familial hypercholesterolemia, or your doctor has already told you to watch your cholesterol closely, that's a conversation to have with them directly, not a blanket rule to ignore. Here's why eggs matter for your legs specifically. They contain leucine, an amino acid that acts like a trigger for muscle protein synthesis, the process your body uses to actually rebuild muscle tissue. As we age, our muscles become somewhat resistant to that trigger, a phenomenon researchers call anabolic resistance, which means older adults generally need more leucine per meal than a younger adult would to get the same muscle building signal. Eggs alone won't fully clear that higher threshold, but they're a genuinely useful contributor, especially combined with the other protein sources later on this list. The yolk also carries choline and vitamin D, both of which support cell membrane health in muscle tissue. Skipping the yolk means leaving a meaningful part of the benefit on the plate. Choline specifically plays a role in maintaining the integrity of the membrane surrounding your muscle cells, which affects how efficiently those cells can take in and use the nutrients circulating in your blood. As that membrane becomes less resilient with age, some researchers believe it becomes part of why muscle recovery slows down, even when protein intake looks adequate on paper. I want to be honest about the limits here too. 2 eggs alone won't fully clear the higher leucine threshold that anabolic resistance creates in an older adult. You'll want to combine this with another protein source, like the Greek yogurt we'll get to shortly, particularly at whichever meal follows any physical activity that day. Think of eggs as a strong building block rather than a complete solution on their own. Cook eggs gently, soft scrambled or soft boiled, rather than hard, high-heat frying, since gentler cooking helps preserve some of the more heat-sensitive nutrients in the yolk. A small amount of healthy fat alongside your eggs, like a bit of avocado or the olive oil we'll discuss later, also improves absorption of the fat-soluble vitamins in the yolk. Number 5. Fatty fish, specifically salmon, mackerel, or sardines. If your legs feel achy or heavy, especially first thing in the morning, low-grade chronic inflammation is often part of the picture. Fatty fish are rich in two omega-3 fats, EPA and DHA, which are among the most well-studied natural anti-inflammatory compounds we have. They work by calming the inflammatory signaling that, over years, contributes to muscle breakdown and slower recovery. Fatty fish are also one of the few strong dietary sources of vitamin D, and vitamin D deficiency is genuinely common in older adults, partly because skin becomes less efficient at producing it from sunlight with age, and partly because many people simply spend less time outdoors than they once did. Low vitamin D is consistently associated with muscle weakness and impaired balance in the research, which makes this a two for one on tonight's framework. It calms inflammation and it supports the vitamin D status your muscles need to function well. There's a reasonable amount of research behind this specific combination, too. Several studies looking at omega-3 supplementation in older adults have found improvements in measures of muscle protein synthesis and physical function, particularly when paired with resistance training rather than fish alone. That pairing matters. The fish appears to support the biological environment that makes muscle building possible, but the actual building still benefits from some form of resistance movement doing the triggering. Aim for 2 to 3 servings a week, about the size of your palm each. Wild-caught salmon, mackerel, sardines, and herring all work. And canned sardines or mackerel are a genuinely affordable way to get there if fresh salmon isn't in the budget every week. If you're not a fan of fish at all, a high-quality fish oil supplement is a reasonable alternative, though I'd still encourage trying to work actual fish into your routine a couple of times a month if you can, since whole foods tend to bring along other nutrients a supplement won't replicate. Number 4. Beets and dark leafy greens, like spinach and kale. These are rich in dietary nitrates, which your body converts into nitric oxide, a molecule that helps relax and widen blood vessels, meaning better blood flow to working muscle. Better blood flow means more oxygen and nutrients actually reaching your leg muscles, and better clearance of the waste products that build up during activity. Research on beet juice and nitrate-rich vegetables has fairly consistently shown improved exercise efficiency and blood flow in both younger and older adults, which is a genuinely solid, well-replicated area of nutrition science, not a fringe claim. Some of this research has specifically looked at older adults with reduced mobility and found measurable improvements in walking performance and muscle oxygen delivery, which is exactly the population this video is speaking to. It's worth understanding what improved efficiency actually means here, because it's a subtler benefit than simply building bigger muscles. The muscle tissue itself doesn't necessarily grow. What improves is how well it uses the oxygen and nutrients that are already arriving. That's a meaningful, practical difference. It's the reason some people report feeling like stairs or short walks require less effort, even before any visible change in muscle size. Now, here's something worth knowing that gets left out of almost every video like this one. If you take a blood thinner like warfarin, dark leafy greens are genuinely important for you to manage consistently, not avoid, because they're high in vitamin K, which affects how that medication works. The issue isn't the greens, it's sudden, inconsistent changes in how much you eat. If you're on warfarin, talk to your doctor about keeping your vitamin K intake steady from week to week, rather than swinging between very little and suddenly a lot. That single conversation matters more than any specific vegetable choice, and it's a genuinely common situation, since blood thinners are commonly prescribed alongside a lot of the same conditions this channel covers. Roast beets at around 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes to an hour to concentrate the flavor without long boiling, which leaches out some of the water soluble nitrates. Saute your greens in a bit of olive oil, which we'll circle back to later, since it helps you absorb some of their fat soluble nutrients. A splash of citrus juice, like lemon, alongside beets, can also help the nitrate conversion process, a simple, low effort addition that costs you nothing extra. If someone you know has been told their leg weakness is just aging and left it at that, send them this video. A lot of what we're covering tonight is genuinely actionable, and it's easier to actually start when someone sends it to you directly. Number 3. Greek yogurt. A single cup of plain, full-fat Greek yogurt delivers somewhere around 17 to 20 grams of high-quality, easily absorbed protein, including a strong leucine content, which, combined with a source like eggs earlier in the day, helps you actually clear that higher leucine threshold we talked about for triggering muscle protein synthesis in an aging body. Unlike some plant-based protein sources, which can be lower in one or more essential amino acids on their own, the protein profile in dairy, like Greek yogurt, is considered complete and highly bioavailable, meaning your body can put it to use efficiently without needing to combine it with something else first. There's also a newer, genuinely interesting area of research here called the gut-muscle axis. Early work looking at whether a healthier, more diverse gut microbiome is connected to better muscle strength and recovery in older adults. The general idea is that gut bacteria play a role in how efficiently your body extracts and uses nutrients from food, and that a less diverse gut microbiome, which becomes more common with age, may partly explain why some older adults get less benefit from the same diet that worked well for them decades earlier. I want to be honest with you that this field is still emerging. The associations are real and interesting, but it's not yet the kind of settled, heavily replicated science that the nitrate blood flow research is. Probiotic-rich foods like plain Greek yogurt are a reasonable, low-risk way to support gut health regardless, which is part of why it still earns a spot on this list. Choose plain, full-fat yogurt rather than low-fat versions. Low-fat yogurt commonly replaces the fat with added sugar, which works against the same inflammation you're trying to calm elsewhere in this list. If you're eating it after a walk or any activity, that timing isn't strictly necessary, but many people find it simply an easy habit to build around a routine you're already doing. Number 2. Walnuts. Of all the nuts, walnuts stand out for leg and vascular health specifically because of their plant-based omega-3 content, along with a set of polyphenols that support the health of your blood vessel lining, the same lining that determines how well blood actually reaches your leg muscles during activity. Healthy blood vessel lining, sometimes called the endothelium, plays a real role in how effectively that nitric oxide from the beets and greens we talked about earlier can actually do its job. The two work together more than they work independently. The fat, fiber, and modest protein in walnuts also help blunt post-meal blood sugar swings, which matters because sharp blood sugar spikes and crashes are, over time, associated with worse inflammation and vascular health. That combination also makes walnuts a genuinely satisfying snack, which matters practically. A food that keeps you full longer is one you're less likely to replace with something processed an hour later out of hunger. A small handful, about a quarter cup, or 7 to 10 whole walnuts, works well as a snack in place of something processed like crackers or a cookie. Keep them raw or dry roasted, not candied or honey-coated, since that added sugar cancels out a good chunk of the benefit. If walnuts aren't for you, almonds and pistachios offer some overlapping benefits. The walnuts specifically have the strongest omega 3 profile of the common tree nuts. And now, number one, the one I promised you at the start: extra virgin olive oil. I know a fat probably wasn't what you expected to top this list, but stay with me because the research here genuinely surprised me too when I first went through it. Extra virgin olive oil contains a polyphenol called oleocanthal. In real published research, including work that appeared in the journal Nature back in 2005, scientists found that oleocanthal inhibits some of the same inflammatory pathways, COX1 and COX2, that over the counter anti inflammatory medications like ibuprofen target. I want to be precise here because it's easy to overstate this. Oleocanthal's effect is meaningfully weaker than a therapeutic dose of an actual anti inflammatory medication. This is not a replacement for medication you've been prescribed. And if you're managing arthritis or chronic pain with medication, please don't substitute olive oil for it without talking to your doctor first. What it does offer is a mild, food based anti inflammatory contribution as part of an overall diet, which is a genuinely different thing from a therapeutic dose of a drug, and an important distinction to keep straight. Beyond that specific compound, this isn't just a single small trial either. A large US study following more than 7,000 adults over 60 found that people with the strongest adherence to a Mediterranean style eating pattern, heavy on olive oil, vegetables, and fish, had roughly half the odds of being classified as frail compared to those with the lowest adherence. A separate multi-year European study followed adults 70 and older forward over time, specifically tracking how closely they followed a Mediterranean-style diet against whether they went on to develop frailty, rather than just comparing people at a single snapshot in time. I want to be fair about what these studies can and can't tell us. The larger of the two is an association, not a controlled trial proving cause and effect. So it tells us these things travel together, not definitively that one causes the other. But it's a genuinely large, consistent body of evidence, not a single isolated finding. There's also active research looking at how olive oil's polyphenols might interact with the same cellular pathways involved in muscle protein synthesis. And separately, some early work on whether these compounds help protect the mitochondria inside muscle cells, the small structures responsible for generating the energy your muscles run on, from the oxidative damage that accumulates with age. I want to flag clearly that this is a more preliminary area than the frailty association I just mentioned. It's a promising direction researchers are actively exploring, not something I'd present as settled, well-established fact the way the oleocanthal inflammation mechanism is. For practical use, 2 to 3 tablespoons a day, used as your primary cooking fat or drizzled over vegetables, eggs, and fish, is a reasonable target. I'd stop short of the very high amounts sometimes recommended online. Remember, this is still a concentrated source of calories, and more isn't automatically better once you're already getting a meaningful amount through your regular cooking. If weight management is part of your picture, that's worth factoring into how much you add, rather than assuming unlimited is better. Buy it in a dark glass bottle and look for a harvest date rather than just an expiration date, since the beneficial polyphenols fade with time and light exposure. A bargain shelf bottle in clear glass sitting under store lighting for months simply won't deliver the same benefit as a fresher, well-stored one. I think about people I hear from in a situation like this often. Let's call him Walter, mid-70s, who'd spent decades on a strict low-fat diet on the advice of a doctor he saw back in the 1990s, avoiding eggs and cooking oil almost entirely. He mentioned to me once that he could no longer get up 2 flights of stairs without stopping to rest halfway, and he'd quietly started assuming that was just what 75 looked like, something he'd stopped even mentioning to his family because it felt like complaining about the inevitable. When he brought this list to his own doctor, and they worked together to reintroduce eggs, olive oil, and fatty fish into his routine, nothing extreme, just consistent daily choices. He told me a few months later that he'd made it up those same 2 flights without stopping for the first time in years, and that he'd actually stopped on the landing afterward just to notice that he wasn't out of breath. That's not a guarantee for everyone, and it wasn't food alone. He'd also started walking most days as part of the same conversation with his doctor. But it's a good example of how the food and the movement work together, not as separate competing strategies, and how something that felt like an inevitable part of aging turned out to be more changeable than he'd assumed. Here's where I want to be very direct with you, because 2 things in this video deserve more than a passing mention. First, none of these 6 foods replace resistance exercise. Nutrition supports the biological machinery that builds muscle, but it's movement, specifically some form of resistance, whether that's bands, light weights, or body weight exercises, that actually gives your muscles the signal to use what you're feeding them. Food and movement work together here. Neither one substitutes for the other. Second, and this is genuinely important, if you're on a blood thinner like warfarin, don't make sudden, large changes to how much spinach, kale, or other vitamin K-rich greens you eat without looping in your doctor. Consistency matters more than quantity for that specific medication. And if you're managing chronic pain or inflammation with a prescribed anti-inflammatory medication, olive oil's oleocanthal content is a mild dietary contributor, not a substitute for that treatment. Please don't adjust your medication based on adding more olive oil to your diet. So here's what I'd actually do with everything we covered tonight. 1. Add 2 to 3 eggs to your morning routine a few times a week, cooked gently, yolk included, unless your doctor has told you otherwise for a specific reason. 2. Aim for fatty fish 2 to 3 times a week. Canned sardines or mackerel count, and they're an easy, affordable way to hit that target. 3. Work beets or dark leafy greens into your meals regularly. And if you're on a blood thinner, talk to your doctor about keeping that intake consistent rather than avoiding greens altogether. 4. Keep a small handful of plain Greek yogurt and walnuts as regular go-to snacks, in place of more processed options. 5. Use 2 to 3 tablespoons of good quality extra virgin olive oil daily as your primary cooking fat, and pair all of this with regular movement. Even a short daily walk counts as a meaningful start. None of these 6 foods are exotic or expensive. They're sitting in most grocery stores, waiting for you to put them to work. And what they're working toward isn't abstract. It's being able to get up from a chair without pushing off the armrests, walk up your own stairs without holding the railing, keep up on a family hike, or simply stand at the sink doing dishes without your legs telling you it's time to sit down. That's what real leg strength buys you as you age. Not a number on a chart, but the freedom to keep moving through your own life on your own terms at your own pace for as long as possible. Everything in this video is general health education, not personal medical advice. If you're managing an existing condition or taking medication, please talk with your own doctor before making any changes. This content is meant to work alongside your care, not replace it. If this was useful, subscribe and hit the bell. I've got a follow-up coming on the resistance exercises that pair best with everything we covered tonight. And it's simpler than you'd think. I'll see you there.